Hi guys, this will be our last new video for this unit. After this video, you will know everything that you need to know to be successful on next week's test. You can also finish all of your Delta Math, so make sure to work on that over the weekend. In this video, we will continue with solving proportions, but we're going to be solving a real-world example of when we would need to use proportions. Make sure to pause the video so that you have time to write down this entire word problem into your notes. This problem says that you've decided to bake some cookies for the math club. The recipe you have calls for 1 cup of sugar and makes 20 cookies. You need 80 cookies to feed the math club. Set up a proportion to find out how many cups of sugar you will need to make the 80 cookies. So it very specifically says in the directions that you have to use proportions to solve this. And we're in algebra class, so we want to really make sure that we are using algebra to solve our math problems. As we learned earlier in this chapter, the first thing you should do when given a word problem is let me know what variable you're going to use and what does it represent. I like to just always use the letter X because that's what I'm used to using. So I'm going to use the letter X. And we want to read the question part, which is usually the last sentence, to figure out what I'm looking for. What am I trying to solve for? So in the very last sentence, it says, set up a proportion, so 2 fractions equal to each other, to find out how many cups of sugar you will need to make the 80 cookies. So that's what we're trying to solve for. We're trying to figure out how many cups of sugar. So that's what my variable is going to represent. X is the cups of sugar that I need. Now, the most important part of setting up a proportion to solve a word problem is making sure that you stay consistent with your ratios. So if you don't remember, ratio is just a comparison of 2 numbers, and basically it's a fraction. So we want to make sure that our fractions on each side of the equal sign are consistent with their units. And so I like to set up a word ratio to start with to make sure that I'm staying consistent on each side. In my word ratio, I'm going to make an executive decision about what units I want on top of my fraction and what units I want on the bottom of my fraction. And it really doesn't matter which one goes where, as long as you stay consistent. So we're definitely going to have two units because it's a ratio. Ratio is comparing 2 numbers. So I just need to figure out what my units are. One of them is probably cups of sugar because that's what I'm solving for. Okay, and it also says cups of sugar here. And then the other unit is going to be cookies. It says cookies in both of these places. So now, again, I just need to figure out which one goes on top and which one goes on the bottom. It doesn't matter. You choose. Really doesn't matter. I'm going to put sugar on top, cookies on the bottom. You could flip it and you'd still get the same answer. It doesn't matter. But make sure that you're staying consistent. So now when I'm writing my equation, on the top of each of my fractions has better be a number about the sugar. And on the bottom of each of my fractions, it's better be a number about the cookies. So I just want to stay, again, consistent. For my first fraction, I'm going to go ahead and use the first information that was given to me in the problem, and I've already kind of underlined it. I was told that 1 cup of sugar makes 20 cookies. And again, since I'm putting sugar on top and cookies on the bottom, I'm going to put 1 on top and 20 on the bottom. Now, in a proportion, I need to have 2 fractions that are equal to each other. So on the other side, I need another fraction. For this fraction, I have one more number. It's at the very end of the problem. It's the number 80, and it is cookies. And we decided that cookies goes on the bottom of the fraction, so I'm going to put an 80 on the bottom of the fraction. And then on the top of the fraction is sugar, and sugar is what I'm looking for. It's what my variable was. So I'm going to put my letter X on top. X amount of sugar to make 80 cookies. Again, you just have to stay consistent. You could flip-flop both fractions. So you could put cookies on top and sugar on the bottom. So you could have 20 over 1 and 80 over x, and you'll get the same answer. Just make sure you're staying consistent. It's the key to solving these problems. I'm going to let you cross multiply on your own. And then make sure for your final answer that you're referring back to the original question. This problem says, how many cups of sugar do you need? And so when we solve for x, we say we need 4 cups of sugar. So your final answer should be a sentence. Okay. So define your variable, make a word ratio so that you're staying consistent, set up and solve a proportion, and then your final answer is a sentence. Okay. Let's do one more of these together just to make sure we fully understand, and then we'll be done with this whole unit. Make sure again to pause the video and write down the problem. This question says, an 8-ounce can of orange juice contains about 97 milligrams of vitamin C. About how many milligrams of vitamin C are there in a 12-ounce can of orange juice? So again, I'm going to choose to use the letter X just because it's easiest for me, and I won't forget what letter I chose. And if I read the last sentence, that's where I can figure out what X is representing. So this says about how many milligrams of vitamin C are there in a 12-ounce can of orange juice? So that's what I'm solving for. I'm trying to find out the milligrams of vitamin C. That's also going to be one of my words in my word ratio. Vitamin C is going to be part of my word ratio. It also says vitamin C up here. So definitely need that in my word ratio. For the other half of my word ratio, because we need 2 halves, I have my can of orange juice and my can of orange juice. So that's what I'm going to use for my other half of my ratio. You can use ounces and milligrams. You can do orange juice and vitamin C. Like, it doesn't matter as long as you understand what you're talking about. And again, it doesn't matter which one goes on top or the bottom, as long as you're staying consistent. I usually put it in the order that it was in the first sentence, because that's a little bit less confusing to me. So in the first sentence, I saw orange juice first, so I'm going to put orange juice on top. And I saw vitamin C second, so I'm going to put vitamin C on the bottom. I can also get for my first sentence, my first ratio, my first fraction. So I have 8 ounces of orange juice, so that's going to go on top, 8. And I have 97 milligrams of vitamin C, and that will go on the bottom since I decided vitamin C goes on the bottom. 8 over 97. The only other number that I have is this 12 right here. And the 12 is referring to orange juice. And I decided orange juice goes on top. So on the other side of the equal sign, I'm going to put the 12 on top. And I'm not sure how much vitamin C. That's what my variable was for. So I'm going to put an X on the bottom. So 12 over X. Word problems are pretty much the only time where I'm going to tell you that I definitely want a decimal answer. Because in the context of the real world, you probably would not tell someone to buy an improper fraction amount of vitamin C. You would probably tell them to buy a decimal amount. So in word problems, that's really the only time where it really is more appropriate for you to write a decimal than a fraction, and this one does have a decimal answer. I hope that you've already cross-multiplied at this point in time and found that the decimal answer is 145.5. So it says there is about 145.5 milligrams of vitamin C in a 12-ounce can of orange juice. Okay, so these are word problems. For tonight's homework, you'll have a little textbook work, but there are also these word problems on your Delta Math, so please make sure that you're working on your Delta Math. And this concludes our entire unit.